To you, sir, for taking time to share your perspective there from Tehran. Thank you, sir. We're going to be joined now by our panel. This whole notion that suddenly what the United States has done may actually be a unifying factor for the people of Iran is one that we probably should take a good look at. Scott Ritter, I'm going to bring you in for this. Do you think as you like to say in your field, the blowback or the backfire here will be the fact that we're actually going to coalesce some forces in that region, specifically inside Iran and maybe beyond its borders as well?
Well, first of all, let's be straight. There was never a problem inside Iran, not one worthy of mentioning in this context. The Iranian government is firmly in charge. There is some discontent about the economy, but it never rose to the level that threatened the viability of the Iranian government. So the notion that the death of General Soleimani is somehow going to coalesce the Iranian government is ludicrous. They were already coalesced. They already were unified in their position against the American posture in the Middle East. The real danger here is that the United States probably tipped the balance in the Iraqi parliament to vote for legislation that kicks the Americans out of Iraq. Now, this has been a long time goal of the Iranian government to get the United States military out of Iraq, and thanks to President Trump, we probably just facilitated that happening. The Iraqi government is very angry. The Iraqi parliament is poised to make a vote, and that vote will probably be for America to leave Iraq.
Let's go to Jim Jatras, former State Department diplomat here. That's an interesting point that he made. You want to follow up on that?
Yeah, the first question, I think Scott is exactly right. And the next question occurs to me is when they do vote for us to leave Iraq, will we actually leave? Or will we insist on staying in? Basically, it would be a resumed occupation role without even the fig leaf of having the permission of the host government to have our forces there. I was listening on some of the other, standard networks where congressmen were being asked about this, and they were giving a kind of, that sort of remains to be seen, whether we would actually leave if they vote us out.
Let's talk about what this actually was. Few people are actually using the word, but I think some are. An assassination, a hit. Is this our new foreign policy? Max Blumenthal?
This reminds me distinctly of Israel's mode of operation, particularly in the Gaza Strip. It reminds me of what they've done since the Second Intifada when they dropped a 2,000-pound bomb on a civilian apartment block to kill Salah Shahada, then the commander of the Al-Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas. But they're not dealing with a local militant group like Al-Qassam or Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They're dealing with a regional power, and Iran is going to do something to demonstrate just that back to the U.S. I don't think that Donald Trump realizes what he's just done.
Michelle Greenstein, you've been working on the reaction that we're seeing from all over the world. What is the reaction from some of the big countries, Russia, China, different countries all over the world, Middle East?
The international reaction is pretty much what you'd expect. We have Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif calling this an act of international terrorism and also an extremely dangerous and foolish escalation. We also have the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, warning that this is going to result in severe revenge from the Iranian side. Now, let's talk about the Iraqi reaction, because after all this happened on Iraqi soil, we have the Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi saying that this might spark a devastating war, which I would say is pretty significant because, of course, we're talking about a post-2003 Iraqi administration. Now, in terms of the broader global community, we have both the Chinese and Russian foreign ministries warning not to increase tensions, saying that all parties should exercise restraint. But let's also talk about the Israeli reaction, because we also had Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who actually spoke with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo just hours before the assassination, praised the strike and claiming that it was an act of self-defense. Take a listen.
Just as Israel has the right of self-defense, the United States has exactly the same right. Qasem Soleimani is responsible for the death of American citizens and many other innocent people. He was planning more such attacks. President Trump deserves all the credit for acting swiftly, forcefully, decisively.
So you have Israel kind of towing the Washington line, which is that this is an act of self-defense. But then you had the
United...
Or is it
vice versa?
Right. I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? But then you also have the United Nations Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial killings calling that claim into question. Take a listen.
Okay.
under international law, self-defense to be lawful will need to be invoked in situations where there is an imminent attack against the interest or the territory, in this case of the United States. At this point in time, the United States has not thus far provided any information suggesting that there was an imminent attack.
Now, there's just one more reaction, if you want to call it, that I want to take a look at, and that's of the major U.S. weapons contractors. We had companies like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, all seeing their stock, interestingly enough, take a rise after this assassination.
That's interesting. In fact, let's do this. Let's bring in Christy I. She's our financial expert here at RT America, and we use her a lot on the Rick Sanchez Show. You know, you always have to ask yourself in these situations, right? Who stands to gain? Who stands to gain?
Exactly, and I'm so happy you brought that up, because let's take a look at this heat map that we have here showing what the state of the current U.S. equities market looks like in the past 24 hours. So if you look at it, global equities dropped around the world, and you see this is like a sea of red, with most of the majors such as tech and healthcare all falling. But the big points of standout green are obviously in oil, energy, and utilities, consumer staples, which is a very safe stock, and that light green up on the upper right-hand corner, which is all defense stock. Defense, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, all the defense contractors as well as manufacturers who are benefiting from this.
That's amazing. It's almost like you could almost predict the pattern immediately after you saw this, right?
Exactly, and this shows that there's a tremendous risk-off movement in the market, because remember, this is only the second trading day of 2020. So most of the portfolio managers, they positioned yesterday in preparing for this enormous trading rally that they've been all running into, only to have the entire global equities market fall out from under them. So now you see a massive repositioning, and they're all moving into safety assets and currencies such as the Swiss franc, the Japanese yen, the Hong Kong dollar, as well as cryptocurrencies, which are all up over 5 and 10% today.
Scott Ritter, Max Blumenthal, you guys write and think about this all the time. What are you thinking when you see suddenly people are becoming multimillionaires overnight as a result of this? Max, why don't you get started, then we'll go to Scott.
I actually don't see a lot of strategic advantage here from a national security perspective. What we're looking at here is an extreme wing of the national security state, which has aligned itself tightly with the axis of extremism represented by Israel, particularly its Likud party and Netanyahu, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. And this axis is extremely upset that Qasem Soleimani managed to mobilize the Hashd al-Shabi, the popular mobilization units, and destroy ISIS, which was, in many ways, a proxy force that supported their interests of destabilizing the Middle East using Wahhabi, Salafi, jihadi proxies. And so this is in many ways revenge, but it's also imperial hubris, because Soleimani not only is one of the most popular figures in Iran, people are in the streets crying because he's been killed. This is seen as an attack on all Shia people in the Middle East, and the U.S. doesn't know. I don't think they understand what they have just triggered.
Scott Ritter, I want to bring you in on this conversation. What are you thinking about this hit? How would you describe it to the American people so they can better understand it?
An absolute unmitigated disaster of a scale of which they are unable to comprehend at this point in time, because right now we don't see a cost. I mean, we're used to this. We're used to seeing American forces deployed to the Middle East. We're used to seeing American drones take out high-value targets. But what we've never done is felt the price, is paid the consequences. And you know, the other thing is we have everybody standing by for an immediate attack. That isn't going to happen. The Iranians are far smarter than this. The last thing they want is a toe-to-toe fight. This is going to be a long, drawn-out strategic defeat of the United States in the Middle East, beginning in Iraq, going into Syria, and we're going to see a retrograde of American power and influence in the region like we haven't ever seen before. It's a defeat of enormous proportions, and there will be economic consequences, geopolitical consequences, and this is probably the least thought out military action undertaken by an American president in modern history.
Could this thing lead to war, and if it does, do we win? Jim Jatras.
In terms of inflicting a lot of damage on the Iranians, yes, of course we could win in that sense. Will we achieve any strategic objectives? I don't think so, and I don't think we understand.
I mean a war. I mean a mano, our troops, their troops. Can we win that war?
we can win in the sense we can inflict a lot of damage on the Iranians. Can we achieve anything where we actually have some objective that we've met? I don't think so.
Scott, do you quickly, Scott, before I go, because we have a special guest standing by, what would your answer to that question be if somebody asked you, could we win a war against Iran?
Look, the new Marine Corps Commandant answered that question when he put out his mission statement. He said, we can no longer count on maritime amphibious forces being able to close with an enemy shore and debarking troops because they have standoff weapons that will sink our ships before they get close. The Iranians have those standoff weapons. This will, if we go to war, yeah, we'll inflict damage, but guess what? They will too.
Joining us now, the president of the Ron Paul Institute and the Liberty Institute, none other than Ron Paul himself. The congressman is good enough to join us on this day on a subject that's certainly near and dear to his heart. Congressman, your son, Rand Paul, today has